Welcome back to the final part of rendering line art with Line Render 9000. I'm Sean Hancox from Meshology.guru, and I'm here with Jonathan, who is the creator of the DAZ Studio plugin Line Render 9000. LR9K is an incredibly powerful tool that enables you to create line art from DAZ renders in a very short period of time, and once you have a setup that you like, you can keep it and use it on other renders and scenes. It's fast, flexible, and can be as complex or simple to use as you like. In this final part, we're going to look at how to add details to your characters, such as tattoos and skin marks, and we'll add a beauty mark as an example. So let's join the tutorial already in progress.
I think now we can talk a little bit about how to replace textures in your scene in order to have a more customized cartoon look.
Okay.
If you'd like.
Yep.
All right. So for this part of the exercise, we're going to be doing a little bit more advanced material work, and this is going to be a little bit more involved with regards to actually adjusting your textures in order to, so it's not going to keep your materials in place. So this is the turning point for this scene is now going to be a cartoon scene only. Whereas up until this point, we really could be rendering it in a photorealistic way still.
Okay.
Because the cameras are doing all the work to give us that cartoon effect, right? We're rendering the same scene with the same materials and the same everything, the same lighting, and we're just doing it with cameras that only care about the geometry of the scene and cameras that will simplify the colors of the scene, and with those resulting images, we can make fairly convincing cartoon looks and line art works from that. So now we're pretending that, no, we want this scene to be a cartoon scene, and we're okay changing this particular scene to have, well, really simplified textures to kind of get a more traditional kind of look, more of like an anime or like a Disney cartoon type of look to it.
All right.
So there's a couple of things that we need to do, but and there are products out there that can be used for this, particular materials that can be used to get a cartoon effect, but you don't really need them, especially in conjunction with LR9K, because LR9K does a lot of the stuff that the other cartoon shaders try to do. So most of the cartoon shaders out there will try to do the shadows, they'll try to do the outlines and things like that, but we're doing those with separate render passes. We're doing those in a different way. So really the only thing that the materials need to do for us is to just portray the color of our scene, and we really only care about the flats mostly, because the old school cartoons don't really have that specular highlighting. So with just shadows and just a flat color, we start to get kind of that look. So let's do that, and we'll kind of see what we end up with.
All right.
So in our particular case, what we can do is we'll need to go and select all of the textures in our scene. So in the Scene tab in DAZ Studio, we're going to need to select Victoria 7 and some of the nodes underneath Victoria 7, and then switch to the Surfaces pane. Yeah, I think we only have a dress and her hair, so thankfully not that many things. And then we'll go to the Surfaces tab, select all of the surfaces in the scene, and then we're going to load a preset that comes with DAZ Studio, and that's called DZ Default. It's a material that can be applied to surfaces on objects. So we should be able to pull it up with a quick search over in our content library if you'd like. It's the letter D and then Z and then default, and hopefully that will pull right up for us. Yep. All right. And once we pull that up, then we can double click that, and that should theoretically replace our shaders to be the DZ default shader. Yep. And we can see that right underneath the word editor down in our surfaces tab, we can see that the shader now is set to DAZ Studio default. I'm not sure what it was. I didn't take note of that. But at any rate, yep. All right, so now we need to make some edits to our different things. So what should we do first? Let's do something simpler first. Let's do the dress. So let's go to our heroine's dress, and here let's change specular strength to 0%. And we can also change diffuse strength to 0%, I think, as well. The main thing that we want to change is going to be the ambient strength, which currently is set to 100%, which is perfect for us, but we're going to need to change the ambient color. So let's select the skirt and the top only, because we're going to pick a different color for the belt. Well, actually, you know what? Let's select all three, and then we'll change the belt separately to be a slightly lighter color. So we'll select all three, and then down on where it says ambient color, we'll click into that, and then we'll select whatever color we want the dress to be. If we want to have a somewhat similar look, we can pick that lightish blue color that we had before.
All right.
But we can pick whatever we'd like. Okay. And then let's select the belt area of the dress. And let's change the ambient color to be slightly lighter. Okay. Fantastic. Alright, so it looks like we have some textures on there, which I was not expecting. I'm not sure if those are actually going to come out in the resulting render because I'm not sure. I think that we're getting them perhaps from... I don't think that shows in the preview window. I think that it's just drawing the... I think it's just drawing the specular. It might be drawing the ambient as well. But ambient doesn't have a map on it, does it? No, it doesn't. Alright, and we don't have an opacity map either. Okay, we will want to change bump strength, actually on all of our things probably, to be a 0%. So we can actually select all of our shaders in the scene and change our bump strength to 0.
In the entire scene?
Yeah, because, I mean, the bump is kind of adding a lot of detail to things. So by default, skin textures and all sorts of things are going to have bump, which is important for kind of the more photorealistic look.
It won't let me change them all at the same time. Because they're all different values. Let's see if I can look out. Oh.
Yeah, you could just clear the maps as well if you... That would probably get us pretty close.
None?
Yep.
All right.
Okay. All right. And so then let's go to the hair. And we're going to do similar things with the hair now, where we're going to change the diffuse strength and the specular strength all the way down to 0 in both cases. And then we're going to change our ambient color to whatever color we want the hair to be. and that's presumably going to be a brown if we stuck with our original type of look. So maybe we go with a slightly lighter brown, so that way our outlining and stuff is going to be somewhat stark.
All right.
Or a red, whatever color we want. And then we'll need to bump our ambient strength up to 100% here.
Okay.
Okay. So at this point, we're not messing with Victorious 7. Let's go ahead and give this a render and see what it looks like. I just want to make sure that we're not getting these patterns and things in there, that it is actually showing ambient. Otherwise, we're going to have to do something with the diffuse.
Which cameras would you like to render?
We only need to do the tune camera here. And actually, we don't really need to use the tune camera anymore, because now we're just going to render it out as is. We're just going to render out the scene normally. We don't need the camera to do approximation to us. So let's switch this guy to the main camera, which is just a regular everyday camera. No special shader on there. No, let's because pass number 2 here is our color ID pass, and it has our line settings and everything set. So let's not mess with that one.
All right.
So let's disable pass 2 and change pass 1 to be main camera instead of tune camera. All right. Okay. Let's render this one out. Do we want to change the file prefix?
I did it already.
Okay, good.
when you weren't looking.
Okay, good. All right.
I have a question that is fascinating me now. It means that every single camera that's in this list, and I shouldn't say camera, but every single pass in terms of the order. So we have order 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. It maintains the settings that it last used, but I can change which camera it's using and change it without affecting the other ones. Is that correct?
That's right. I typically will just add a bunch of passes and then enable and disable them to keep the settings the way that I want for the particular passes. But yeah, you can certainly do it the way that we have been doing it, where the way that I think about it is that our pass number 1 is the main color of our output image. So in this case, it is appropriate, in my mind, to change it from the tune camera to the tune two-tone camera to the main camera, because we're changing what effectively is a layer in our Photoshop later, from using the tune camera, which is an approximation and a blurring of the colors together, to main camera, which is just a normal snapshot of the scene.
That's an interesting tool. I never thought of using it that way, because that means that I could add a bunch of other cameras. Like I could add 2 cameras for each, and I could toggle between each one and say, oh, I like this render better than I like that one, so we're gonna fiddle with this one instead of that one, kind of a thing. If you know what I mean.
Mm-hmm. And one of the things that's somewhat handy about the LR9K auto render script is that it starts to become really, really easy to do that, where, especially if you're dealing with a higher resolution image where the resulting render takes a little bit of time to do, you can schedule a bunch of different renders to all be outputted from the same angle and same everything, so you can compare them side by side. And then you can click render and go make yourself a sandwich or something while they're going, instead of having to come back and babysit.
That's a really interesting point. I never thought about that. So if I was saying, okay, I'm trying to decide what let's say line edge threshold I'm trying to use for a camera, I could put in 3 of the same cameras using the exact same angle, change each of the line edge thresholds in each of those same cameras, and then when I compare them in Photoshop or GIMP, I could say I like this one the best. We'll go with that one.
That's exactly right, and that would be a fairly reasonable way to dial in your settings without render, look, render, look, render, look. Especially when you have a pretty good idea of what your ranges are, then we could have, at the beginning of this, video, when we were starting, if we didn't have any idea at all of what our line width or edge threshold should have been, we could have added our edge blend camera and then do 5 or 6 renders with different settings and then do them all at once, and then we can start saying, oh, this one was the closest. Pass number 4 was the closest, so let's adjust that one and go from there.
Wow, that's awesome. Do you want the camera and the lines both?
No, we don't need lines. We'll just use the main color output. Okay, it looks like we did indeed get the texture of the dress. And yeah, so okay. So we need to go back to the material settings, and I need to correct a few things.
All right.
So this did not come out the way I wanted. So sorry, dear viewers, but I am not as all-knowing as maybe some people thought I was. We need to make a couple of edits to the material settings in order to make the ambient colors come out correctly. So what we're going to do, and we can do this for, I think, all of the surfaces in our scene. Let's go ahead and select everything, and then we're going to change the diffuse color to be pure white with no map, and we'll change the diffuse strength to be and yeah. All right, so let's change the diffuse strength here to be, actually, sorry, the problem is the lighting model. So selecting everything like we have now, change the lighting model to matte, or actually there should be something that's like ambient under there. Yeah, I think that's what we want, matte. Yep, and then change the diffuse strength up to, like, let's just say 100. It might wash out the color a little bit, but then we'll start getting a realistic color look then. And okay, why on earth is the dress still giving us that texture? Why? Why, oh why? Let's go to the dress.
Yeah.
And then let's pick like a particular part of it, like the...
No, not about the skirt.
Like the skirt. Yeah. All right. Where do we have it? Where do we have a texture map? Oh, diffuse still has it. That's why. Blah.
So diffuse has a color map right there. Yep.
Yeah, take that off. So.
And for the top as well.
Yep.
Leave it on for the belt, or you want me to take it off for the belt as well?
Take it off for the belt as well.
Alrighty.
We're going for a boring look. All right. And then go back to the hair, because the hair is all dark. I think we need to do some stuff with that as well. So here we're going to change. Okay, we already are matte, and we already have a diffuse strength of 100%. I think we're okay here. Let's render it again and hope for the best.
I think the only thing that might give us an issue is the skin tone, and So there's the current render.
All right. So here we're getting, it looks a little bit better. The hair is a bit dark for what we want, but we can see that now the dress and the belt are coming out with nice flat colors.
Yep.
And then I think that if we end up adding our detail lines on top, we'll get a pretty good look, I think, from it.
Yep.
So like right now we don't have the Fresnel reflected V nor edge blend lines in there.
So now what we're going to do is we're going to add in the Fresnel reflected V lines and the edge blend lines that we rendered out earlier.
Yep. Okay, so here this is starting to look a little bit more like a cartoon image. Well, the dresses, right? The dresses. But we got those nice detail lines sort of where the creases in the dress are.
Yeah.
So now we need to dial in the hair color, making that a little bit lighter, and then we also need to fix all the skin tone stuff. So that's all black right now because we basically told it to be all black. So we're going to need to make some adjustments there.
All right.
So back to Daz Studio, and now we're just going to keep replacing the color render over and over. We can keep all of our other lines more or less intact.
And you want to start with the hair?
Yes. Why is that coming out so dark is the question. If we click on an individual surface, do we end up with, yeah, see those have maps on them, and that's probably why. Yeah. So select all the parts of the hair and let's take off the map for diffuse color. Change that to none, please.
Okay.
And then okay, let's go ahead and render that out and see if that fixes our problem. I expect that it will. But we only really need the main color render for this one.
Yep.
Should be the one on the far left there. Yep, where the hair looks normal.
Yeah.
Sweet.
Nice.
Okay. You want to drag that underneath the lines? Okay. Yeah, so now we're getting kind of a pretty good look.
Yeah.
It'll start looking good if we can get the skin tone good. All right, so let's go back to Daz Studio. And we saved the more challenging part for last, but the key is that we're mainly having the color being derived from an ambient color. We're removing the major texture maps. In our case, we're going to have to make a couple of fixes to the maps here on Victoria 7. But for starters, let's select skin, lips, and nails. Okay, and let's change here. We're going to toggle the diffuse color map to take that off. We don't want the original skin map. Yep, and we're going to leave the diffuse color white like it is. And now we're going to change an ambient color. So here we're going to have to pick a skin tone. So this tends to be rather an interesting experiment most of the time for me. So in our case, what I usually do is I pick a color that's how to describe it. So right now you see the color is sort of in the, well, okay. So kind of where you are horizontally in the grid, drag that down
Just right here?
considerably to about 3/4. Yeah, that little crosshairs type of deal. Yeah, drag that down until we get kind of to a lighter pink type of tone. Yeah, that should be good. I think about right there.
Okay.
It's kind of a peach. And then let's make it a little bit darker than it is right now.
Or?
Okay, yep, that looks like an okay skin tone to me. That's probably already a little bit too orangey, but I think we'll give this one a shot and see how it ends up turning out. Okay, and now, yeah, let's go ahead and render this out. Let's see what this flat looks like, because if we're going to have to change the skin tone more, I'd rather do that now.
Now, the interesting thing about this, though, is that once you've done this, you can save the presets and they're done.
That's correct.
Not bad.
All right. Yeah, that actually does look pretty good for a cartoon skin tone. Obviously, we could over we could spend a lot more time getting it perfect, but it's looking okay, I think. All right, so let's fix some of the other things on Victoria. And so notably, just looking at this image, there's a couple of things that we need to fix. We need to fix the eyes and the eyelashes.
Mm-hmm.
So let's give that a little bit of attention next.
Alrighty.
So back in Daz Studio, so let's change a couple of the eye things to be invisible. So we're going to change eye moisture and actually, I think you're right on cornea. Sorry.
And I think
Eye moisture and cornea.
opacity down to 0. I think is what we did in the previous episode.
Yep.
Yep.
Yep. Let's change opacity down to 0 on that one. Okay. And then with the sclera, that's sort of the white of the eye. We need to change that one to white. We should also probably remove the diffuse color there.
Okay.
The diffuse map, I should say.
Yep.
Yep. Okay, so that should make the eye white. It looks like it did in the preview, which is good. Except for here we're going to change our ambient color to be white. That matters because when the light hits it, we don't want it to be darker just because it's kind of sunken into the face.
Okay.
Okay. And then now we can go to the irises, and that's going to be her eye color. So same sort of story there for irises, where we want to take the map off, and then we want to pick a color for her eyes. So I don't know if you want to pick something that's, yeah, we could pick whatever color you want.
Let's try green.
Sure.
Green eyes.
So yep, it's pretty dark green. But that's fine. Ambient strength is up, and yeah, that should be fine. And then let's go to the
What about the pupils?
pupils.
Yeah.
Yep, we're going to need to change that. So here we take the map off again and change the diffuse. So ambient color in this case is going to be black. We want to change the diffuse color to also be black in this case, because we don't want the diffuse color to lighten the dark color. We want it to be black. Yep, that's good. Okay, and now let's go to the eyelashes.
Mm-hmm.
Alright, so then for eyelashes, we're going to do the same sort of story with diffuse color here. We want her eyelashes to probably be the same color as her hair color, maybe? Or we can just make them black. I usually will just do black, so let's just do diffuse color black here. Ambient color black is good. Here we're going to need to select an opacity map, because you can see that right now we don't have an opacity map. So this is another one of those scenarios where we could get fancy and make our own opacity map that's a little bit more simplified. I usually don't notice a big difference, so I usually will just stick with the opacity map that comes with character. So we can do that here, and if we don't like it, we can take a look at and come up with a plan B. So if you click on the opacity strength map, we should be able to find the lashes map in our recent history. Yep, it should be our Kalen lashes. Yep, that should be fine. It should be a black and white. Yeah, that looks fine to me.
Yep.
We want to clear the map off of the displacement strength because we really don't want it to be displaced, I don't think. Okay. So that should be the major elements of the character. If we wanted to, some other things to consider are slight color differences for the fingernails, toenails, and lips. I tend to do a slight variant on the color for the lips to give a little bit of distinction, so maybe we do that. So let's go to the lips thing. That should already have the same color as the skin. And then let's go to the ambient color. And then what I do is I'll just click the red value down in the red section. Just up that by like 4. So make it like 206. Okay, and then press OK. So it's not a big difference, but that's usually close to what I do. All right, so let's render this out and see what we end up with. Wait, no, we already had one. It's number 3. It's the one right after.
Well, we got our eyes, that's for sure.
Yep.
And the previous one was this one. Nice.
Okay.
Wow. Yeah.
Okay. Yep, so it's starting to look good. And now we're starting to run into why I typically don't do a lot of outlining around the eyes. Her eyes are like all black basically right now. So in this case, I'd probably take the color ID thing around the eyes themselves in order to have a little bit more room for the eye natural color to come out
Right.
a little bit more. It's pretty important if you're just doing line work to get that line in there. I usually don't think I need it if I'm adding colors where the eye has got the white transitioning to green.
Right.
Usually adding in like a line there is going to be too much. It obviously depends on how zoomed into the face you are and some stuff like that. But
Right.
some considerations for that. But now we should know kind of how to control that. We should know how to make a line appear there or not appear there by the material settings and the color ID settings would be the main two things to look at if we wanted to change that up. So yeah, I think this is looking pretty reasonable. So let's go into a little bit more depth as to how to do some effects on the character. So right now we basically have flats. We're not doing anything other than one solid ambient color for all of our surfaces. And this does look like a normal cartoon sort of.
Yeah, it does. Yeah.
Which is good. So let's say that we wanted to do something a little bit different, like we wanted to add some distinguishing marks, like beauty marks on the face, or a tattoo on the skin, or something like that. There's a couple of ways of approaching it. One way to approach it would be to actually make your own surface entirely of a solid color plus the beauty mark or tattoo or what have you on top of it. I don't usually do it that way, and the reason why I don't is I like to be able to control my colors in DAZ Studio separately. So as soon as I get into a multicolor scenario within a single image file, it starts becoming a little bit unwieldy. So let's take, for example, right now we selected a skin tone, and that's all fine and dandy, and it looks okay. Now if we made an edit to a skin texture to make it all this color, and then we added some beauty marks to it, then later if we say, you know what, we want the skin tone to be whatever, slightly yellower, slightly redder, whatever, in that case, we would have no choice but then to go and edit our textures again and again and again. And Victoria 7 has a bunch of different textures, right? She's got a different texture area for her legs, for her torso, for her arms. All that is all different. So that instead of being able to select all the materials for her skin like we did and change the color, now we have to edit like 5 or 6 different textures, right? So that's sort of my rationale for saying I don't want to go there if I can help it. The way that I do approach it typically is through the usage of geometry shells. So let's go back to DAZ Studio and we'll add a geometry shell to Victoria 7, and then we'll just add some, let's add like a beauty mark to her face just to show how to approach this sort of problem.
All right.
All right. So in the scene node, we have Victoria 7 selected. So now we go to the Create menu up in the toolbars in DAZ Studio. And then there should be an option within this menu called Geometry Shell. New Geometry Shell.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
What would you like to call it?
So I think the default name and label is fine here.
All right.
Although I guess we could change the label to be Victoria 7 Beauty Mark. Okay. All right, so after adding it, now we have an additional node underneath Victoria 7, and what this node is sort of Victoria 7's geometry with a slight offset. So it's another Victoria 7 that follows Victoria 7's pose and movements, but it's slightly, ever so slightly bigger than Victoria 7 is, which gives us kind of an extra layer of skin, or whatever we want to call it, an extra surface on top of Victoria 7.
It's a cat suit.
Yep, it's like a cat suit. All right, so from here, we already have the surfaces pane open and we have Victoria 7 beauty marks selected. So then here, the only thing we really want is to make an edit to the face. So what we can do is for all of the surfaces, we can just change the opacity strength all the way to 0. Right now it initialized to the value of 50%, which is kind of why we're seeing this like slightly white color over it, but opacity strength.
Opacity strength. Take it all down to 0.
Yep, take it all down to 0.
All right.
All right, so so this basically reverted it back to what we had before. Now this geometry shell isn't being shown whatsoever. So now we're going to make an edit to the face. So if we select the face by itself, now we need to do some edit in, I typically will do it in Photoshop so I kind of know what I'm doing. So if we go to the one of the maps, and if we click on the drop down underneath the map, we should get a list of the of her original textures that we were using. So let's select face there, the 101 JPEG there, and that's just so I can quickly browse to it. So then I'll click on that again and select browse, and then that should pull it up in the navigation menu.
And it was face, so I'm guessing
So I just want to pull up a template of the face, and then we'll just open that up in a Photoshop or something. And that's just so we know where on the face we're putting the beauty mark.
So there's three I notice here. Actually, there's more than three. Does it make a difference which one? Obviously, it must.
No, not at all. It makes no difference to us whatsoever. So we just want to open up, yeah, we just want to pick one of these to open up in Photoshop so we can make our own texture for this. So it really doesn't matter that we select one here in our diffuse color. We just want to open it up.
All right.
Yeah. Okay, so here we are in Photoshop, and now we have an example of the face and where things would show up. So we can see that her original texture already has some beauty marks kind of wrapped in there. So what we need to do is create a new layer, and this layer should be all black, and then we'll draw in white the where we want the beauty marks to be. So we're effectively making a opacity map. So we're still going to actually control the color inside of DAZ Studio, but we're going to draw on top of the face where we want the beauty marks to be.
All right.
So I tend to exaggerate these a little bit because it's a cartoon, and we want to actually be able to see them. So we'll just change to a pencil or a pen or something like that, and change the color of our pen to white, and then make sure we're drawing on layer 1, and then we'll just draw some white kind of where her beauty marks are on her face. It doesn't really matter, you can use your own artistic license. Actually, I would do a bigger pen so they're more uniform, or however you want to do it. That's actually looking okay. Maybe too detailed that way, actually.
How's that?
Okay. Yep. Sounds good.
So crank this up to. I turned the opacity down to see the layer underneath, obviously.
Right. So now we want it to be completely black and white like we have it. Can we fill in that tiny little bit of white there? Kind of not a big deal, but
How's that?
all right. Perfect. Looks great. All right. So now we can save this out as basically our beauty mark opacity map.
As a JPEG or PNG, does it make a difference?
Not really. No. All right. So now back to DAZ Studio. Selecting the geometry shell and the face texture on the geometry shell. We're going to remove the diffuse map that we added there just to navigate to the texture. We want that to be pure white. I think that's what we're still navigating right now. So I think we want to cancel out of this dialog and then switch that guy to a no texture, diffuse color. Down to opacity strength, that's where we want to select the opacity map that we just created.
Okay. And turn it up to, I'm assuming, 100.
Yes.
All right.
All right. So let's select the map there. So under opacity strength, we'll click the little drop down, and then that's where we're going to select the map that we just created. No, it won't be in your recently used because we haven't recently used it in DAZ yet. You should find it if you click browse now. It should go to the last place you browsed, I hope.
There we go, beauty mark. So all this is a black and white.
That's correct. So now we can see that beauty mark kind of showed up in the preview. It's kind of underneath her eye there.
Yep.
All right. So then now let's change specular strength down to 0%, and and then for ambient color, let's change that to kind of a brown. So that way it's kind of a brown that's contrasting with the more pale skin tone that she has. Yeah, that should be okay, I think. We can always change it if we don't like it. So then diffuse color, let's just make sure that that's a white. I'm assuming it is.
Yes.
We just need to scroll up ever so slightly. And let's change the lighting model here to matte. Okay. There we go. Let's render it out.
That's cool. That's really neat.
Yep. So you can create multiple geometry shells on the same object. So if I have a need to have different things, for example, maybe I want to have a geometry shell layer, so to speak, for makeup, and a different one for beauty marks, and a different one for tattoos, you can do that, and that would be the way I recommend doing it. I also almost always will create opacity maps, so that way I can control the color of the of whatever it is in DAZ Studio without having to edit the textures more than once. So once I've got the texture correct for whatever I might want, I might do an eyeliner or a beauty mark or a tattoo, and then in order to change the color of it, you just change the color of the texture. The opacity map is staying the same.
Wow. And it's always in the same position on the body no matter what because of the geoshell.
That's right. Yep, and it's going to follow her wherever she goes. So as so this advanced texturing stuff is a little bit more time consuming to dial in everything in comparison to the Toon camera that we had earlier. But this gives you pretty fine control over what the final image looks like, and it also gives more of a traditional cartoon type of look to it. And it's not that bad overall, right? You're just selecting solid colors, and then the output rendering is just a solid color of the image. So that's sort of how I approach doing cartoon stuff. Now, if we wanted to have skin highlights and stuff like that, we can certainly do that, and we can certainly do that with the textures. I don't think we're going to do that in this tutorial here. But to do that, you would turn on the specular strength. So instead of using the matte, which doesn't have specular, we would change it to something different, like plastic or one of the other rendering models, and then we can select the specular color, and then the highlights are going to start coming in based on your lighting. So if you want to have kind of that more airbrushed look or something, you can play around with specular to have kind of a good contrast between or not a contrast, but a gradient really between the specular highlight fading into the ambient background. But yeah, that's basic texturing and cartoon characters for you in line render.
Well, you know what? That's pretty amazing. And you know what? I'm looking at the hair, and I don't know what you think about 3D hair, but I think that hair looks almost more realistic than the 3D hair that I get in a quote realistic render.
Yeah, it still has a bit of detail in it, and I like a lot of the detail, especially kind of near the top part of her head. I think that that looks really good to me. I think that if I were going to continue refining this image further, I would make a different opacity map for the hair, cutting out some of even more of the detail in there. Because right now it's somewhat detailed still, even though I did try to simplify it, and I think I did simplify it somewhat. I would continue to experiment with simplifications of it to a black and white image until I started getting more wisps that looked more like how a cartoon render would render, or a cartoon like an artist would draw it out. So that does require a little bit of experimentation and a little bit of knowledge of, Photoshop or GIMP or one of those types of things. But it's pretty simple drawing. I mean, when we did that, for example, the edit of the face texture to add the beauty mark, it was like scribbling a little dot on the face in the approximate location. So it's not like it's ultra challenging Photoshop work, really. So
That's neat. That's impressive. I never thought of including or incorporating color into my line art stuff, but that's because it was just another level of complexity that I thought was, kind of beyond me at that point. I was just struggling with black and white. I figured if I could get lines, that was good enough. But now looking at this, I'm going, the number of possibilities are virtually endless. It's what I can imagine.
yeah, that's right. And there are certainly some challenges to getting good color, especially when you're trying to add a little bit more detail in. So if you're doing solid colors like this, like old style cartoons, it's not too bad. But a lot of the pre-built models and textures that are out there don't really have the nice distinction in your color surfaces, so you can get the different selection of colors that you want. So it takes a little bit more creativity on certain scenes to do it, and that's just sort of because of the market right now is kind of geared more towards the photorealism, and there's still a lot of shortcuts being taken with regards to the way that the textures are. So sometimes you have to be a little bit more creative with texture edits and with things like that in order to get a convincing cartoon look. But hopefully what we've covered in these tutorials should give people a pretty good basis for understanding how to approach it, how to know where the lines are getting drawn, and how to combine several images all together in order to kind of create an art style that they like.
Yeah, well, I certainly think that it's helped me, and I'm assuming that if it's helped me, it's helped anybody else. I don't consider myself
an expert by any stretch of the imagination.
Well, I think that's been extremely inspirational and informational. Jonathan, I think you wrote it, like I've said it before, I'm going to say it again, you wrote a great plugin. It does amazing stuff. It allows you to composite a number of layers into a single product very quickly. Although the render times throughout the videos, I've made mention that I've sped up the render times. The longest render time that I've had is about 60 seconds for all of the cameras running all at the same time. So we're not talking, hours or 20 minutes or, 3 hours. I've heard some people having render times of overnight. No, we're not talking overnight. We're talking like a couple of minutes. So I sped it up because I didn't think anybody really wanted to sit there watching a screen render with nobody talking for 2 or 3 minutes. I hope that you follow us on Facebook. Jonathan will, hopefully be there to answer questions if they have them. I'll answer what I can from what I've learned from him. You can follow us on Meshology.guru, and this is the end of our 3-session tutorial on using Line Render 9000 to create line art. If you have any suggestions or questions for us in the future, by all means, shoot us a line. And Jonathan, I really want to thank you for your time. I know it's been a long haul. We've been talking for several months before we even got around to doing this. And thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks a lot for having me. I'm happy I had the excuse to talk a little bit more about line render and its capabilities and get into the nitty gritty. So thanks again.
Well, thank you, and thanks everybody for watching, and see you in the next tutorial. Bye now.